The desert night was still, broken only by the whistle of wind scraping dust across cracked earth. The moon hung pale and hollow, casting silver light on the abandoned street of Red Hollow. A gunshot cracked, echoing like thunder, and silence returned as smoke curled into the air. Eleanor Kane stood in the glow of the saloon lanterns, her revolver steady, her lips pulled into a smile sharp as her blade. She whispered, "Fools never learn." The body at her feet twitched once before settling into the dirt. She was no stranger to death, but each time left another scar she never let anyone see. The townsfolk hid behind shutters, whispering prayers, yet they feared her more than the devil himself. The story of destiny began with that shot, for trust was a currency she would never again trade. Tonight, blood inked the first page. The night air smelled of gunpowder and fear. Eleanor holstered her revolver, her movements calm, like a woman who had rehearsed this 100 times. She said softly, the dead whisper truer than the living. Her boots carried her into the saloon, doors creaking as silence fell heavy. Inside, shadows clung to the wooden beams. Men avoided her gaze, pretending to sip whiskey while sweat dripped from their brows. She scanned them, her stare cutting deeper than her blade. Every man knew she had come for something more than coin. Somewhere among them, truth hid like a rat. Yet even rats bit when cornered, and Eleanor knew destiny had sharp teeth tonight. Eleanor moved to the bar, her fingers drumming the counter. The barkeep, a wiry man, trembled as he asked, "Drink?" She smirked, "Answers." The saloon quieted further, every man's ear straining for her words. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "A name," she said, "and a debt unpaid." The barkeep's hand shook as he wiped an already clean glass, his eyes darting to the corner where a shadow shifted. Eleanor's gaze followed. Somewhere in the dark sat a man who thought himself safe, but destiny had already marked him. Her smile never faded, though it promised no mercy. The figure in the corner shifted, his spurs jingling faintly. He was younger, with a scar carved down his cheek, and his hand lingered near his revolver. Eleanor's smile widened. "Seems the rat shows teeth," she whispered. The saloon held its breath. She walked slowly toward him, her boots tapping like a ticking clock. His eyes met hers, steady but defiant. He said, "Your past bleeds too loud, Kane. Best let it die." She laughed low, sharp as a knife. "I don't bury ghosts, I carve them." Her hand rested near her weapon, the room tense enough to snap. The barkeep whispered a prayer as silence stretched. The outlaw stood, his chair scraping loudly, revolver half drawn. Eleanor didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on his, steady and merciless. She said, "Trust kills quicker than bullets." The room trembled with anticipation. In that frozen second, the West held its breath. The outlaw hesitated, his bravado cracking under her grin. Men ducked under tables, glasses rattling on wood. She raised her hand slow, deliberate, as if daring him to finish what fate demanded. Dawn was building, and Red Hollow knew blood would paint its floor before dawn. The saloon air grew heavier as Eleanor sat at a table in the corner, her revolver resting within reach. The men avoided her gaze, their whispers fading into silence. She said quietly, "Every debt finds its collector." A young man slipped inside, his eyes too bright for a town this dark. He couldn't have been more than 20, carrying a cheap rifle like it weighed more than his courage. He scanned the room until his eyes met Eleanor's, and he froze as if her stare pinned him to the floor. She tilted her head, amused, for his face bore the same hunger she once carried. The boy swallowed hard and muttered, "Ma'am, I came to ride with you." She leaned back, her smile unreadable, wondering if destiny demanded another lamb for slaughter. Eleanor studied him, her eyes sharp as the blade hidden beneath her coat. The boy's voice cracked as he said, "My father died in your fight, and I won't let it go unpaid." The saloon stirred with nervous shifting, men suddenly interested in their drinks. Eleanor's lips curled, her words cutting low. "Vengeance burns hotter than whiskey, but it leaves nothing but ash." He tightened his grip on the rifle, defiance mixing with fear. She leaned forward, her stare steady. "Do you even know who you're hunting?" The boy shook his head, but his jaw clenched. She thought of her own youth, reckless and blind, and saw a reflection she never wanted. The barkeep poured whiskey with shaking hands, pretending not to listen. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence. "Your father fought for a cause that buried him. I don't fight for ghosts. I fight for debts yet unpaid." The boy's jaw trembled, but he forced out, "Then I'll follow you until the debts are done." Her stare lingered on him, searching for cracks in his resolve. She remembered when loyalty was fresh and untested, before betrayal taught her its price. The boy's hands shook, but his eyes did not falter. She smirked slightly. "Then don't blink, boy, because destiny doesn't wait for courage." The saloon doors burst open, letting in the chill night wind. A man stepped inside, tall and broad, dressed in polished leather too fine for Red Hollow. His badge gleamed, and the crowd stiffened. The lawman's eyes swept the room before landing on Eleanor. He was older, calculating, a smile sharp as steel. "Kane," he said, "trouble follows you like buzzards." Eleanor's grin was slow, mocking. "Buzzards find meat where law won't." The boy shifted uneasily beside her, sensing danger in the way the air grew thick. The lawman's hand brushed his holster, but he didn't draw. Not yet. A storm of words was brewing before the storm of bullets. The lawman strode closer, boots clicking sharp on the floorboards. "This town's patience runs thinner than your mercy," he said coldly. Eleanor tilted her head, her smile never faltering. "Mercy is a new sheriff, and I don't wear rope." The boy's eyes darted between them, sensing old grudges boiling just beneath the surface. The barkeep whispered a prayer under his breath. The lawman leaned in close, his voice low. "Your debts bleed into my town, Kane, and I decide who pays." Her hand hovered over her revolver, the promise of violence alive in the silence. Trust was fading, and blades were sharpening beneath every word. The sheriff lingered at the bar, but Eleanor had already marked the shifting air. She rose slow, boots dragging dust as silence crushed the room. Her hand brushed the revolver, though she kept her smile sharp and calm. The boy stepped closer, whispering, "We should leave." Eleanor didn't look at him. Her eyes cut to the corner where another man emerged, his hat low, his steps deliberate. She knew that scar across his jaw. It belonged to a traitor once called ally. He sneered, "Kane, you never did bury the past." Her grin widened, but her tone was icy. "Some ghosts deserve carving twice." The boy's breath hitched, realizing destiny was pulling more blades into the circle. The outlaw with the scar stepped forward, spurs clinking on wood, his hand resting on his belt buckle. He smirked, "You left me for dead, Kane." The boy's eyes darted between them, his knuckles whitening on the rifle. Eleanor's voice slid through the tension. "I should have done it right the first time." The sheriff chuckled coldly, sipping whiskey as though he owned the moment. "Past sins always find daylight," he muttered. The boy whispered, "Who is he?" Eleanor's stare never wavered. A reminder. Andy. The outlaw's hand twitched near his revolver, daring her to move. The saloon seemed to shrink, every board groaning under the weight of fate, sharpening its blade. The scarred outlaw's sneer deepened. "Word is you've been carving your way across the frontier, smiling like a saint while spilling blood like a devil." Eleanor's lips parted into that same dangerous smile. Better a devil honest with her blade than a coward hiding behind shadows. The boy trembled, torn between awe and fear of the woman he'd chosen to follow. The sheriff swirled his glass lazily, amused by the growing storm. The outlaw hissed, "You'll bleed tonight." Eleanor tilted her head, her voice low, steady. "Then let destiny decide whose blood writes this story." The saloon went silent again, as though the air itself feared to breathe. The outlaw drew half an inch of steel from his holster, the glint catching lantern light. The boy raised his rifle instinctively, but Eleanor's hand shot up to stop him. Her voice was calm, almost mocking. "Easy, he's not worth your first bullet." The outlaw laughed, low and bitter. "You always did love stealing the moment." The sheriff smirked, eyes darting between them like a vulture watching prey circle. The boy lowered the rifle reluctantly, sweat dripping down his temple. Eleanor stepped forward, her boots tapping like a drumbeat of judgment. "If you want my blood, you'll need more than a scar and old grudges." Her smile never faltered. The outlaw snarled, slamming his revolver fully onto the table, daring her to act. The boy flinched, but Eleanor's eyes never blinked. She leaned forward slowly, her smile stretched thin. "Trust me, boy," she murmured. "This is how the West chews and spits." The outlaw spat on the floor, growling. "You'll see the dirt before dawn." The sheriff tapped his glass, mocking applause. "Careful, gentleman and lady. Red Hollow's floorboards already creak with ghosts." Eleanor's hand hovered closer to her weapon, the air so tight it threatened to snap. The boy swallowed, whispering, "What happens now?" Eleanor's grin was merciless. "Now destiny sharpens its teeth." The night dragged its chill across Red Hollow as Eleanor left the saloon. The boy trailed behind, clutching his rifle, his eyes wide from the tension still thick inside. They walked into the darkness beyond lantern light, where silence pressed heavy. From the shadows, an older man stepped forth, his limp carried with dignity, his beard silver in the moonlight. His voice was gravel, heavy with years. "Kane, you walked the same road I once bled on." Eleanor's smile thinned, her eyes narrowing. "And where did it take you, old man?" He studied her like scripture, regret etched into his weathered face. "It took me to graves, not glory." The boy shivered, sensing wisdom sharpened like warning. The boy whispered, "Who is he?" Eleanor didn't answer, but the old man did, his voice low. "Name's Samuel Briggs. Once carved my own path with steel." His eyes locked on Eleanor, full of sorrow and warning. "You carry the same fire, but fire eats its owner." She laughed dry, though it rang hollow. "I don't need sermons, old man. I need debts paid." Briggs shook his head slowly. "Debts paid in blood never balance, Kane." The boy watched silently, torn between idolizing Eleanor's defiance and absorbing Briggs' wisdom. The night pressed close, their shadows stretched long, as if fate itself loomed taller than them all. Briggs lowered himself onto a rock, his limp making each step heavy. He looked at Eleanor, as if staring at his own younger reflection. "I once thought vengeance would ease the weight on my chest. It didn't. It chained me." Eleanor's smile faltered for the first time, but her words cut steady. "Chains can be broken with the right blade." Briggs' eyes hardened, or tightened until they choke you. The boy glanced between them, his youthful face conflicted. Eleanor turned toward him, her tone edged with challenge. "You follow me, boy, and you'll learn ghosts never rest." Briggs' sigh lingered, thick with a truth neither wanted to face. The old man's gaze fixed on Eleanor, piercing deep. "Your blade's sharp, but your heart bleeds louder. That weakness will carve you down." Eleanor stepped closer, her boots crunching gravel. "Weakness keeps me alive, Briggs. I never forget the scars that made me." His voice rose, sharp and heavy. "And those scars will bury you if you mistake them for strength." The boy shifted, uncomfortable, watching the clash of steel in their words. Eleanor's grin sharpened again, though her eyes flickered with something darker. "Then let the dirt take me when it dares. Until then, I carve destiny, not sermons." The night seemed to lean closer, listening. The boy finally spoke, his voice trembling, but determined. "If scars bury us, then I'll be buried too." Briggs looked at him with pity, shaking his head. "You're too young to choose graves." Eleanor's smile returned, thin as a knife's edge. "Youth always chooses graves. Some just dig faster." The wind picked up, carrying the chill of desert night, rattling brush nearby. Briggs' hand gripped his cane tighter, his voice heavy with finality. "Mark me, Kane. Blood writes nothing but more blood. You'll find that lesson too late." Eleanor turned away, her coat snapping in the wind. "Then let fate keep its watch. My blade writes tonight." Her words cut like scripture. The desert wind howled as Eleanor, the boy, and Briggs returned to town. The sheriff stood waiting at the crossroads, lantern casting harsh light across his badge. His eyes gleamed with triumph. "You've bled this place long enough, Kane." Eleanor tilted her head, her voice dry. "Law never cared until coin crossed its palm." The sheriff smirked, pulling a paper from his coat. It was weathered, sealed, and bore her name in bold ink. "A bounty, signed not by me, but by someone closer than your shadow." Eleanor's grin froze, though her hand tightened on her revolver. "Who?" she demanded. The sheriff chuckled. "Your own blood." The sheriff dropped the paper into the dirt, the name Eleanor Kane burning through the silence. "What?" The boy bent to read, his face pale. Briggs muttered, "Some betrayals cut deeper than bullets." Eleanor's smile twisted, bitter. "Blood writes the cruelest stories." The sheriff's voice was smug. "Your sister signed it, Kane. Seems family wants you dead more than the outlaws." For the first time her hand faltered, lowering slightly. Memories flickered of laughter long buried, faces blurred by time and grief. She whispered, "So the knife was always in my back." The boy looked at her with fear, realizing destiny was not just steel, it was blood. The boy whispered, "Why would your own blood betray you?" Eleanor's face was carved from stone, though her eyes burned with fire. "Because trust kills quicker than bullets," she said coldly. Briggs stepped closer, his voice steady. "She was never free of the men who used her name. Power twists kin worse than enemies." Eleanor's lips curved into a hollow smile. "Family died the moment greed was born." The sheriff laughed cruelly. "So Kane, you wear a smile but carry a blade. Perhaps your sister wears the crown while you dig her graves." The boy flinched, sensing truth cracking Eleanor's iron mask. Eleanor's boots scraped as she stepped forward, her voice sharp. "If my sister wants my blood, she'll learn I carve deeper than kin." The sheriff raised his hand, signaling shadows behind him. From the darkness, men emerged, guns glinting, their loyalty bought in silver. The boy gasped, his rifle trembling. Briggs' jaw tightened, his old eyes seeing the trap unfold. Eleanor didn't flinch, her smile cold as iron. "So this is how trust ends. Coins, lies, and family curses." The sheriff smirked. "Red Hollow writes no legends, Kane. Only graves." The boy whispered, "We're outnumbered." Eleanor answered with fire in her grin. "Good. Destiny prefers a crowd." The air grew heavy, thick with dust and silence. Eleanor's voice cut the dark. "Let her come herself if she wants me dead." The sheriff sneered, "She doesn't need to. I'm her blade." The boy's heart pounded, sweat glistening on his face. Briggs whispered, "This is the turn you can't walk back from." Eleanor's smile sharpened, her eyes blazing. "I never walked back from the first turn." She raised her revolver, the sound of steel clearing leather like thunder in the night. The sheriff grinned, signaling his men. The street became a stage, destiny written in gunpowder and blood, and the first act of betrayal ended with fire in Eleanor's eyes. The street of Red Hollow froze under the pale moon, lanterns flickering weakly against the wind. Eleanor stood at the center, revolver steady, her grin sharp as death itself. The sheriff smirked, his men tightening their circle. The boy raised his rifle with trembling hands, trying to steady his breath. Briggs muttered, "This is where ghosts are made." Eleanor's voice cut through the silence, cold and merciless. "Then, let's give them something worth haunting." The first outlaw moved, hand darting for steel. Eleanor's revolver barked fire, echoing like thunder through the desert night. The battle had begun, and destiny had finally bared its teeth. Gunfire erupted, rattling the wooden walls of Red Hollow. Sparks lit the night as bullets tore through dust and lantern light. Eleanor moved like a phantom, her revolver spitting fire, each shot precise. The boy fired wildly, his fear mixing with desperate courage. Briggs ducked low, gripping his cane, shouting warnings through the chaos. The sheriff watched, his grin unshaken, as though violence itself bent to his command. Eleanor dropped two men, their bodies falling into dust, her voice rising fierce. Trust me now, boy, or bleed with them. The young man's hands steadied, his shots sharper. Blood and dust mixed, painting the street with destiny. The sheriff stepped forward, finally drawing his revolver, his movements slow and confident. His voice cut through the chaos. Your blade's sharp, Kane, but mine carries law. Eleanor's laugh was ragged, her eyes burning. Law is just a mask for thieves with badges. The boy shouted, firing at another outlaw, his courage hardening with each shot. Briggs dragged one wounded man aside, his limp straining with effort, muttering curses at old battles reborn. Eleanor and the sheriff locked eyes across the chaos, their duel inevitable. She whispered to herself, this ends where it should have started. The sheriff's smirk deepened, his revolver aimed steady. The air itself held its breath. The sheriff fired first, his bullet slicing the air. Eleanor twisted, dust exploding where she had stood. She rolled, her revolver barking fire back at him, sparks lighting the night. The boy shouted, Eleanor! But she was already moving, her grin stretched wide. Briggs groaned as stray bullets cut close, his cane clattering against stone. Outlaws fell one by one, their loyalty dissolving in blood. Eleanor's voice rose, wild and defiant. I don't bow to crowns, kin, or law. Her shot tore the sheriff's hat from his head, splintering wood behind him. His smirk never faltered. Then you'll bow to the grave. The town trembled under their war. The shootout thinned, bodies strewn in dust, lanterns shattered, smoke heavy in the air. Only Eleanor and the sheriff stood steady, guns still raised, eyes locked like predators. The boy crouched, blood on his cheek, rifle shaking but still aimed. Briggs leaned on his cane, weary but unbroken, his voice hoarse. End it, Kane, or it ends you. Eleanor's smile was a blade, cruel and fearless. Destiny doesn't wait for permission. She stepped closer, revolver leveled, her boots crunching over blood-soaked dust. The sheriff's grin widened, daring her. The night fell silent again, the west holding its breath for the final shot that would carve truth from betrayal. The silence after gunfire was heavier than the shots themselves. Dust hung in the air, glowing in moonlight like ghostly ash. Eleanor stood in the center, revolver still smoking, her grin faint but unbroken. Across from her, the sheriff staggered, blood blooming across his chest, his grin fading at last. He fell into the dirt with a final gasp, the weight of law buried in dust. The boy lowered his rifle, his face pale with the shock of survival. Briggs limped forward, his voice low. You carved destiny, but every cut leaves scars. Eleanor whispered, then let the scars be my scripture. The street was still, except for ghosts. The boy dropped to his knees, staring at the fallen sheriff, as if death itself had entered him. It's over, he muttered, though his voice cracked with disbelief. Eleanor holstered her revolver slowly, her eyes never leaving the body. Briggs placed a weary hand on the boy's shoulder. It's never over, son. Death only passes the debt to the living. Eleanor's grin faded, replaced by something harder, quieter. She whispered, blood never forgets. My sister waits in shadows, and I'll follow the trail. The boy looked up at her, fear mixing with loyalty. Briggs closed his eyes, knowing destiny would drag them further than graves. They walked away from the corpses, lanterns flickering in broken windows. The boy carried his rifle, hands trembling though his stride tried to match hers. He asked, what if trust is all we've got left? Eleanor's laugh was bitter, cutting. Trust is the blade that carves the quickest graves. Briggs limped behind them, his voice tired. Without trust, you'll walk alone until the desert swallows you whole. Eleanor didn't answer, but her silence was heavier than words. The boy's eyes followed her, realizing he was bound to a woman who carried destiny like a curse. The town whispered behind closed doors, already telling legends of her smile and her blade. They reached the edge of town, where the desert stretched endless beneath stars. Briggs stopped, leaning heavy on his cane, his voice final. My road ends here. I can't bury more ghosts. Eleanor turned, her eyes soft for a fleeting second. You already buried enough. Briggs nodded once, his face lined with regret and peace. The boy shifted uneasily, whispering, "We need him." Eleanor shook her head, her smile faint but sharp. "Mentors give wisdom, not salvation." Briggs raised a weary hand in farewell. "Carve careful, Kane, or the blade will carve you." Then he turned back, leaving them to the night. Eleanor and the boy walked into the desert, their figures swallowed by starlight. The wind whispered like voices of the dead, carrying secrets and scars. The boy asked softly, "Where do we go now?" Eleanor's grin returned, sharp as the blade beneath her coat. "Toward the next debt, toward the next grave." She didn't look back, though the town would remember the woman who smiled while carving destiny into fools who trusted her. Her footsteps echoed like scripture across the barren land. The boy followed, knowing his youth had ended the moment he chose her path. The desert swallowed them whole, leaving only silence, dust, and legend.